Listen up, real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and agents. You're in the right place. Unlocking the secrets to real estate investing and entrepreneurship. Welcome to the Titanium Vault, hosted by RJ Bates III. Here's RJ.
Hello and welcome to the Titanium Vault. I'm your host, RJ Bates. Today we're sitting down with Mike Hambright. Mike, how are you doing?
Good, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Why don't you take a second to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do in real estate investing?
Yeah, that used to be an easier question to answer. I used to say I'm a real estate investor, but that's evolved into quite a few things over the last, the last handful of years. But yeah, I'm a real estate investor primarily in the Dallas-Fort Worth market. And have been for almost 10 years now. I've done hundreds of deals here, and that kind of evolved, pretty much right out of the gate. We started accumulating some rentals, and so now I have a rental business with a portfolio of rentals. And I guess a few years into my business, got into the coaching space and have been doing coaching and mentoring ever since, and that's kind of evolved. Let's see, about 4 years ago, hard to believe that it's almost been 4 years here, I started a podcast called FlipNerd. And for the first kind of 18 months, it was really just a podcast. And then it turned into kind of a membership platform, membership site for real estate investors where we create lots of content and share lots of tips and tricks and write blogs and stuff like that. So on FlipNerd.com, we have about 100,000 real estate investor subscribers now that kind of follow along with what we're doing. And I think that summarizes it at a fairly high level. Started a mastermind for experienced investors here recently, and had our first meeting just, a few weeks back, and that's off to a pretty good, at a pretty good rate as well.
I want to touch base on all of those different things that you're doing, but let's go back to the beginning when you got into investing and you started building the rental portfolio. Kind of walk me through what that was like when you left your day-to-day corporate America job and what kind of spurred you to go full in on real estate investing.
Yeah, it was really, and I'm sure you have to, you talk to a lot of real estate investors through our shows where you meet somebody that's kind of hit rock bottom, and then they found success. And so mine was never as rock bottom as some of the folks that I know that were like living in their car or anything like that. But I mean, truthfully, we were in a difficult position where we had to figure it out, but never quite that bad where I was homeless or anything like that. But it was definitely stressful. So for me, the story really is I worked for a large company here in DFW, a multi-billion-dollar company, and had what I thought was a great job. I mean, I honestly was kind of a made man on the inside. I could do whatever I want because I worked directly for the CEO. I was kind of his right-hand man. And so that was cool until it wasn't. So I kind of thought I could be there for a long, long time. And then truthfully, one day, just kind of out of nowhere, he got fired. And it was just like a kind of a corporate politics thing that just kind of brought him down. And I was his outspoken right-hand man. So I was kind of like next in line. And so that just kind of came out of nowhere. At the time, though, my wife was a consultant, so she was traveling a lot. She really did not like her job at all, but did pretty well financially, made more money than I did. So here I am, kind of a newly married. At that point, we'd probably been married for less than 2 years at that point. And so it was more than a blow to my ego. I mean, it was a big blow to my ego, but other than that, it wasn't like financially destitute or anything because we didn't have kids yet. We didn't have a lot of responsibilities financially. But during that process, I had to find another job, and my wife decided to leave her job to support me taking a new job in Washington, D.C. So we moved out there, and I worked for another company. It was I was a retail, so it's not like I was in politics or anything like that. I never would do that. But right. So I went to work for we called it a startup, but it had grown in just a few short years from nothing to about $500 million in sales. And the problem is, we were flying high. I was there for about 18 months, and kind of towards the end there, unfortunately, they had grown rapidly, but it was profitless growth for the most part. And during that time, they had gone public, so there started to be a lot of pressure on profit, and the company just was not profitable. So they filed bankruptcy after I was there for about 18 months. And truthfully, right before that happened, I mean, I kind of knew that was about to happen. So I decided to leave. And at that point, a lot of people lost their jobs anyway. So I just kind of tried to preempt it, I guess. But, the reality is, at that point, we had just had my son. So my wife had left her job to kind of support me taking this new job. My son was born, who was about 2 months old at that time when I left. And we were in Washington, D.C., which really wasn't home for us or going to be either. We knew we were coming back here eventually, but just didn't realize it'd be that fast. And so kind of here we are. And this was like the beginning of 2008. So the market was starting to slow down. It was harder to find jobs. And so, the reality is I felt like corporate America had let me down like twice in a row, very large company and then a somewhat smaller company, and just kind of felt this pressure as like, my wife and I had been married for, I guess, 3 years or so at that point, and my son was 2 months old. I just felt this pressure of, man, I've got to figure out how to support my family because this corporate America thing isn't quite working for me. And quite frankly, I'd gone to grad school. I went to one of the top programs in the country, and I just felt like, hey, this whole corporate America thing is not all it's cracked up to be. I put a lot of time and effort into trying to be successful in corporate America, and to find out that I really have no control over my own destiny. So I think it was kind of this wake up call of, hey, I've always been kind of entrepreneurial, but I'd never really, I never started a business or had never really done anything significant. But that's the route that I needed to take. And I'd always had an interest in real estate investing, but had never really done anything about it at all. But we decided to kind of dive in. So that was kind of the beginning of the decision to get into real estate. And there's a lot more to the story, but I know that I could always end it by saying, and the rest is history. But
right.
Truthfully, there's a lot that happened after that. But that was kind of the beginning, I guess.
So did you start off with wholesaling, rentals, fix and flips? What did you start off with?
Naively, and truthfully, I say naively, we started in the summer of 2008. And I guess I really didn't have a whole lot of awareness of what was going on in the market. Now, of course, in DFW, it wasn't as bad as Arizona or Florida or, Las Vegas or California market. So it was never really quite the downturn as there. But in hindsight, when I look back, I mean, people thought we were crazy for getting in because the market was, kind of, I'll use air quotes here, crashing. It wasn't really crashing, but it definitely slowed down here. Now, in hindsight, I think that was perhaps one of the best times to get in, was when all the other competition was running away and we were kind of running in, We didn't know that at the time, but in hindsight, I think it was a great time to get in. So, yeah, the funny thing is I really had very little knowledge of wholesaling when we kind of made the decision to get started. I wanted to, just because of, watching TV shows when I was growing up, and I guess that far back, there wasn't really a whole lot of flip this house type stuff. Maybe there was a little bit, but there was, God, this is going to really date me if I say this, but shows like growing up watching like This Old House and stuff like that. I grew actually for about 4 years in high school and college. I worked for a company called Menards, which is in the Midwest, but it's kind of like if you're in the Midwest, you know it, but it's effectively kind of the third largest behind Home Depot and Lowe's.
Hold on real quick. I have to interject because I'm pretty sure this is the only time I'm ever going to be able to mention this.
Yeah.
I'm a huge NASCAR fan.
Yeah, there you go.
And my driver is Paul Menard.
There you go.
I know all about Menards.
Yeah.
One time I went up to Indianapolis for business, and I was so excited because I saw an actual Menards. And so I pulled off, like, immediately U-turned and went in and just walked around. And it's a really cool store. I love it.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Home Depot, really.
Yeah.
But truthfully, I don't even know. I'm sure they have hundreds of stores, but I don't really even know how big they are. But pretty good size for the Midwest. But yeah, so I'd always been around kind of people fixing stuff up and building houses and construction. Although I even to this day, if you need me to hang a picture, if my wife needs me to hang a picture, it's going to take me a couple of weeks to get around to that. But anyway, so I really didn't know a whole lot about wholesaling. I just knew about kind of fixing, flipping, or conceptually about it. and knew that I wanted to own rental properties and kind of build wealth. But very quickly we realized how powerful wholesaling is in terms of cash flow for your business.
Right.
But yeah, so truthfully, our first year, we just, as I said, failure just was not an option we were willing to choose. So we ended up buying 65 houses in our first year, and probably rehabbed roughly half of those, and then wholesaled or mostly assignments, the other half. And I don't know if we kept very many rentals in the first year, probably a couple, but that probably started to happen in kind of more year 2, 3, 4. But yeah, so we were just a machine and just cranking them out as fast as we could, and that's kind of how we started. So
I always love the stories about how people got their start, because it's amazing. Even when I tell my story to people, it's like, yeah, I did some fix and flips, but then I realized, well, wholesaling really helps out with cash flow, so we started doing that. And then I started getting properties under contract, and I'm like, well, passive income is almost even better than the cash flow at wholesaling, so these rental properties are even better to keep. And it's so funny to hear story after story where people kind of progress through that, where it's maybe the TV shows got you in to fix and flip, but real quickly you learned wholesaling and buy and holds might even be a better strategy for you long term.
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, now we have about 40 rentals here in DFW, and we haven't. It's been harder to add them in the last few years, just because it's because I'm spoiled by what we got in the 2009 to 2012 time frame with rentals. But yeah, I look back now and wish that, like, man, I wish I had 140 of these things or had 500 of these things. And so if I had it to do over again, there's a lot I would do differently. But mostly it would include keeping a lot more rentals.
So let's talk about you creating FlipNerd. What is FlipNerd, and how did that come about? I know it started as a podcast, but how did the platform itself come about from the podcast?
Yeah, so one thing that I started to do here in Dallas Fort Worth, so I've always been kind of big on networking. I mean, even if I go back to high school and college and stuff, I was always a connector. I was always kind of hosting, happy hours or pulling people together or having parties for my friends or whatever. So I've always kind of been that way, like pulling people together. And when I got started in real estate investing, I didn't. It's kind of a lonely business. Like if you don't start to build out your network, it gets kind of lonely. And there are RIA clubs, and I've always been a big sponsor of RIA clubs. Certainly even here in the Dallas Fort Worth market, I was a sponsor of one of the larger clubs for a long time. But truthfully, it was one meeting a month. It was like a general meeting. I'm like, what are you going to do the other 29 days of the month? So, and honestly, I won't say anything bad about RIA clubs, but there just tend to be a lot of newer people that are trying to figure out like how to move forward. And so it got kind of lonely as kind of an experienced investor, somebody that I could talk to about what's working and what's not. And so what happened is I ended up creating this kind of just concept of people coming to watch us rehab houses. So at the time, during those years, we were rehabbing probably 6 or 7 houses at any given time, actively had projects going on. And so I started this thing called Rehab Live, and it was a way to build my buyers list, a way for me to network. But I would invite people to come watch us rehab a house. And so they would it would kind of work like this. Like they would come meet us 3 times. So they would, register, if you will. There's no cost or anything, but just let us know you're coming. And we kind of added them to a mailing list. And so we would meet at the house right before we started the project. Sometimes we hadn't even closed on it yet, like we're about to. And I always picked houses that were the worst of the worst, that there was going to be a major transformation visually. And so we would meet at the house kind of at the beginning, and I would show everybody, and I would have them try to estimate what they think the repairs are and what they would do and think about it. We'd kind of talk about it. And then we'd meet again halfway through, and maybe two weeks later, and then we'd meet 2 or 3 weeks later again when the project is done. And I would order pizzas and stuff. We literally there was no furniture or anything in the house. We would just literally sit in the living room and talk about the project, like how we did it, why we did this, why didn't we do that, how much did this cost, and just kind of educate people. And so through that process, I built up a decent following here in DFW of people just knowing that, hey, if you come across any deals that you want to wholesale, I'm your guy. If you want to get on my wholesale list, we'll add you to it. And so it was just a great kind of networking opportunity and a way to build relationships here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And then what happened is I started to say, well, what if I did this online? What if I started to do some things where I could reach a broader audience? So I hired a video guy that worked for me for probably, that might have been a year and a half or so, 2 years even. And he effectively just kind of followed me around because I was constantly going to check on projects and stuff anyway. And so we kind of moved that show online, if you will, where we're rehabbing projects and people are kind of watching, I guess, from anywhere in the world. Now, in hindsight, we did a whole lot of effort to create that content, and we're really terrible at distributing it to a broad audience. Like we just kind of relied on organic stuff on Facebook or our mailing list that we had, but there was no kind of, in hindsight, there wasn't a great strategy to really build a list, which we could have done very differently, knowing what I know now. Right. But that evolved into a podcast. And at the time, there were some other real estate podcasts out there, but really not anywhere close to what there are now. I mean, there were, probably a handful of some of the early pioneers, people that actually are really good friends of mine now. Sean Terry, Matt Terrio, Joe McCall had his podcast, and there were just a few out there that were kind of actively being added to. There were a couple where somebody did a few shows and they never came back, but for the most part, it was a fairly small group. So that was 4 years ago, and I knew that we would kind of wrap a site around it, like a membership site of some sort, without necessarily knowing what that would be. But it's just it did evolve, and it continues to evolve as to what FlipNerd is all about. But we try to, if nothing else, make it a safe place that, most of the content on the site is free. We have over 1,500 shows across 3 different podcasts that we've created up until now that have a ton of great information, and it's all completely free.
That's crazy. 1,500 shows. I remember when FlipNerd, the actual platform where as a wholesaler you could enter the properties on the map and try to market your property. I remember that when that came out. Wasn't that in 2014?
That was probably probably late 2014, early 2015. And you could still do that now. It's that's actually a funny thing. We don't probably market that enough, but you could post a property on, so we basically have a listing platform. So you have to be a member, you have to log in, but you could log in for free effectively. And you can publish a property, which is just add pictures, write a description, how many beds and baths, a simple form that you could do in a few minutes. And it'll be on the site. So you could send out a link to somebody if you wanted to kind of promote your listing. It's kind of a digital flyer, if you will. But for people that are what we call an elite member, so they're a paying member, they actually receive real-time emails and text messages that a new property in your market has been listed. Right. And in fact, this is one of the things that we really haven't promoted all that much at all that we need to, is if you're in, we have 100,000 subscribers, so we don't, historically, we didn't know where they all were at, so we're doing a much better job now of identifying where people are at, so we can add them to effectively kind of buying lists and markets all over the country. But, for example, if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth market, and this happens to be our largest market just because of where we started at, but we have thousands of members in Houston and San Antonio and Atlanta, but lots of other markets, L.A. But if you were to post a property, you can, after you post it, which is free, you can it'll give you the chance to promote it to that market for $197. So it'll actually email it out to everybody that we have in that market. So it'll tell you, if you were in Atlanta, for example, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but it might say, do you want us to email this out to 1,800 people or whatever the number is? And so that's $197, but it's a way to get, if you don't have a buyer, like a big buyers list, it's a way to get it in front of a lot of people that you wouldn't otherwise get to. But yeah, we have some features like that on the site that are pretty cool.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is when you rolled that out, we saw the site and we were just getting started in wholesaling. And I remember probably 2 or 3 of our first 10 properties we sold through FlipNerd.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. We posted it on there, and then also it helped us build our buyers list, by posting it on there. Maybe that property didn't work out for everybody, but we were able to get in front of investors, nurture a relationship, and then further on down the road, maybe sell another property to them. So it's definitely a great tool especially for newer wholesalers to get their properties out there and also potentially build their buyers list as well.
Yep.
So another thing that you're currently building or have just started is Investor Fuel. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we started, again, kind of back to my roots of always being kind of a connector. And, I mean, I didn't start, like I said, I started all these things with the intent to build my network without actually knowing what the benefits would be, I guess. But truthfully, if there's anything that's happened over the last 3 or 4 years through FlipNerd, is my network has just kind of exploded. So just blessed to know a lot of great people and have access to a lot of people that I wouldn't have had otherwise, or companies as well. And so, like I said, I've always been a connector, and a mastermind I've always done kind of, mastermind's a loose word, but I've always done things like that where people that I've coached and mentored, I've always connected. Hey, you need to talk to this person. Let me connect you with this lender. Let me do this and that. So I've always kind of done that, if nothing else, informally. And I've been a part of a number of different masterminds and just saw the opportunity to get involved with that myself and try to help a lot of people and be a connector. We started Investor Fuel, which is, you can learn more at investorfuel.com. I guess we had our first meeting about a month ago, about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And so it's what we're really, have there is I do some coaching and mentoring and things for people that are brand new. This really is for people that are actively doing deals. So we really want somebody that's already doing at least a deal or two a month. And there's some people in the group that have done, over 1,000 houses. So we have some pretty talented individuals in there as well. But we're generally looking for people that are kind of newer, or doing a deal or 2 or 3 a month that we can. It doesn't really. Honestly, it's really easy to take somebody that's doing 2 or 3 deals a month, give them some guidance, connect them with the right people, and for them to double their business or better. It's harder to take somebody that's already doing 20 deals a month to get them to double or triple that. I mean, that's a lot harder. But yeah, it's a great group. It's interesting because we've only had our first meeting. We have our 4 meetings a year, which are already set up for next year. And, it's going to be interesting to see how we grow from one meeting to the next. Cause honestly, we got tremendous feedback that was, what people just really enjoyed it, got a lot out of it, built some great relationships. When I set it up with some really talented people that could help me grow the mastermind and could add things that I can't add. So we've got, guys like John Martinez, which is kind of probably the nation's leading sales trainer now for real estate investors, and Trevor Mock from Investor Carrot, and Paul Lazelle, who's a virtual wholesaler that's doing 20, sometimes 30 deals a month all over the country. And Matt Andrews is a good friend of mine. He adds a lot. So I've brought in some people that can add a lot of value to the group, and this is kind of all of our mastermind. We're kind of using this as a platform to build all of our networks and try to add value along the way. So yeah, we're off to a good start.
Yeah, I could tell, because you always know when a good event's going on, when you get on Facebook, when the event's happening, and your entire Facebook feed is nothing but people checking in or taking pictures. Or
oh, cool.
Talking about how great the event was. Unfortunately, we weren't able to make it this time just due to timing and prior commitments. But the whole time I was sitting there looking, and I'm going, man, look at all, John Martinez, like you said, and Trevor Mock, and all people that, I have the utmost respect for. So it obviously was a huge success.
We're off to a good start.
Yeah. So with everything that you have going on now with FlipNerd and Investor Fuel, what does your real estate investing business look like now? Is it more focused on those, or are you still doing investments?
we're still doing deals. We're still doing deals. And I have, I have some, the coaching and mentoring stuff that I do, we've kind of taken it to a much higher level where we're really forming kind of partnerships with people. So we're still actively doing deals on our own, for sure. But truthfully, I like them. I guess I'm at a point where I don't have to work as hard as I used to, but I'm kind of a workaholic, so I struggle with like setting back. I mean, that's just not me. But I get a lot more out of this business when there's a networking component to it, or when there's like a teaching component to it. So we definitely still are doing deals ourselves in DFW and have a fair bit of activity going on. But as I move forward, I'm probably doing more things like through others and with others, through joint ventures and coaching partnerships and the Mastermind and stuff like that. Honestly, I do deals with some of the guys that are in the Mastermind. This one of the guys that does virtual wholesaling, he buys tons of stuff at auction all over the country. And so he gets stuff in DFW, and we kind of partner on those things. And so, I've just found that it's a lot more fun to be doing deals with other people. And of course, since I've been in the business for so long, like we still advertise and generate leads on our own, but there's just more and more from my network that tends to, kind of fall in my lap, if you will, just from relationships and having been kind of out there beating the bushes for so long.
Right. So for the listeners that are newer or might be struggling a little bit, for someone that's a high-level player like you are, what kind of advice would you give them where today's market is? What would be the best strategy to break into real estate investing or change the tide of a struggling business?
I would say that I think a lot of new people that are trying to get in this business just give up too early. And I think I like to say that it's a simple business. It's simple to understand. It's not rocket science, but it's not easy. There's a lot of moving parts. And I think a lot of times I saw somebody post a meme this morning that said something like, people they'll work for somebody else for 40 years before they'll work hard to build their own business for 2 or 3 years, And I think, unfortunately, a lot of us are like that. We want to pop a pill and lose 50 pounds and just take the easy route to do things. But I think if you want this bad enough, you have to just basically not let failure be an option and not give up. And so it's easy to get distracted by people that you see that you perceive to be a big dog or doing lots of deals and stuff. But when you pull back the covers, sometimes there's more to the story. And so don't let that bring you down, that you're not getting deals and somebody else looks like they just did 10 deals. Like you don't know the story. They might be like a co-wholesaler and they're only making $1,000 on each of those deals. Right. And when they worked 80 hours a week to get it done, and not to take anything away from that person, but there's often more to the story. So I would say if you just really kind of sit down and define what it is that you want to accomplish. And it's not a number of deals. It's financially, like how much money do you want to make?
Yeah.
And then kind of back into how to get that done.
Yeah, I'll take that a little bit further as well, because with today's social media presence, it can get a little bit daunting when, if you get on Facebook or Instagram and all you see is, quote unquote, your competitors talking about how great their business is. Well, of course, that's what they're going to be putting on social media. Right. No one's going to be sitting there saying, well, I got 10 properties under contract to wholesale and I didn't I didn't sell any of them. I had to drop them all. No one's going to post that. They're going to post the big check. They're going to post about their beautiful flip or things along those lines. You're not getting a full glimpse into their business. So don't get downtrodden about that, because maybe you're not getting the same success. They're only going to share the success with you. Very few people do I know share their failures as much as they share their successes. So it is kind of a give and take with today's social media age, and I'm a huge advocate for using social media to build your brand and build your, awareness, like you're talking about networking. Now you have people bringing you deals, which essentially lowers your marketing costs because you don't have to market as much. Right. Because you have people just bring it because they know who you are because of your branding and getting your name out there. So just utilize social media, but don't make it the end all be all where it can almost deflate you, and because you're not living up to what you're seeing on social media from other people.
Yeah, don't let it bring you down, and don't let. I guess we're very good at letting other people's success or perceived success define what we want or need. And I think once you kind of get a level of business maturity and get past that, to say that that's good for them, whatever, good for them, or I feel sad for them, or whatever the story might be, but that has nothing to do with your goals. It shouldn't. Right.
And I use the example of a lot of people come to me and they say, "Oh man, RJ, you're killing it because you're flipping houses in Hawaii." Well, there's a little bit of a background to that. My childhood best friend lives in Hawaii and he's a contractor. This has nothing to do with the success or failure of my business. It just happens to be that I had an opportunity. So don't look at the fact that I'm buying a house and flipping it and it looks like it's in paradise, because it is, means that I'm far more successful than you or anything along those lines. It's funny how people can misconceive the success or failure of someone's business just based off of a couple of posts on Facebook or Instagram or things along those lines. And like you said,
Yep.
Make your goals and build a plan out to achieve those goals, and don't worry about what anybody else is doing. I mean,
that's right.
To be honest with you, you and I are in the same market. I don't ever sit there and think, well, what's Mike Hambright doing in Dallas that I need to be doing over here in Fort Worth? I mean, we're essentially in the same market. We compete against on leads and marketing, but I never think about that.
Right.
And I'm sure you never think about what I'm doing either. So, anyways, moving on. We rapidly flew through our allotted time here. So let's move on to what is your why and the driving force behind creating your real estate investing business, FlipNerd, Investor Fuel, the coaching and mentoring. What is your why?
Yeah, I think that is evolved. I think it kind of went from, maybe certainly early on it was financial reasons. Like I want to make money. I want to feed my family. I want to do things. Then it got to a point to where, hey, I make more money than I need to live on. So it was more about impact, like leaving an impact or making a difference. And I think that's kind of where the phase I am now. I probably should, I guess historically I was probably more worried about making an impact or making an impression or making things better for other people. Even though I wanted to improve things for other people, maybe it was more selfish, like this need to feel like I'm adding value or whatever, I guess. But I think a lot more now about as I kind of move forward, this is going to sound like, well, haven't you been doing this all along? And this kind of goes back to where I think a lot of real estate investors get hung up on success or what they want, what success means for them. And because, a lot of us get into this for lifestyle, right? Like we want a better lifestyle. We want more time. We want control of our time. And I've kind of struggled with that, even though I preach that. Sometimes I don't practice it because I'm also a workaholic and I'm just always thinking about business. And my hobbies generally include solving business problems and things like that. But I think more and more about just the freedom of my own time. And so I guess as I kind of move forward here, my focus really is more on impact and just enjoying what we've worked so hard for over all these years.
Where do you want Mike Hambright to be in 5 years?
5 years? Oh, man. That's a good question.
By the way, this is my favorite question to ask people just because they're like, really, RJ? You didn't tell me you were going to ask me that.
Yeah. That's a good question, man. I would like to believe that, more and more of what I've done, which I enjoy, is virtual in the sense that even if we're buying houses here, I don't necessarily need to be here. I have a good team. And I think through some of the relationships and partnerships that I'm building, I can generally do those from anywhere. So, truthfully, I think my son is 10 right now. In 5 years, he'll be 15, 16. That is scary. He'll be driving close to that. I don't know. I think more than ever, I want to make sure that I am not I'm not like the Evander Holyfield of real estate investing where I just don't know when to say when. Right. at some point I just am comfortable where I'm at. I'll always be doing deals. There's no doubt about it. But I think it can be, I don't think that, a lot of folks, especially on social media, back to those conversations, kind of thump their chest forever. I'm big and I'm doing more deals and growing my deal flow every year. I think at some point I've kind of realized that it's not necessarily about unit volume, even though I've done a lot of deals. My goal is not to triple the size of my deal flow. I mean, of course I want to make more profit, but I think what I've kind of discovered is I can have a more profitable business if I am showing other people the way and kind of connecting people and being a conduit there. So I think, I don't know how to answer that question. I'm kind of tiptoeing around it, but I think, just making a bigger and bigger impact and doing it in a way to where I'm not impeding on my personal and family life any more than I already have in the past, and probably trying to enjoy more of that time.
Well, as a father as well, I can only imagine my son's 5, and to think about him being 10 is such a huge jump. And so for you, going from 10 to 15, it's almost like they're a different being at that point.
Yeah.
It's 10, they're still a kid. 15, 16, they're driving. It's whoa, what happened? He went from kid to almost an adult. So, yeah, as a business owner, it becomes more and more important where you are more present in that part of your life and less present in your business, but you're creating the business to still function as well as when you're as involved in it as you are now. So
right.
I understand that. So my last question to you, and quite possibly the most important question, you and I are both huge Dallas Stars fans. And so I'm giving you the opportunity. We're recording this on November 21st, 2017. What are the Dallas Stars going to do in the 2017-2018 season? How far are they going to make it?
Man, I hope they turn around. So it's funny because Kevin, who is really kind of started as my general contractor and still is a contractor, has become a great friend of mine. He's rehabbed a couple hundred houses for me. And we're kind of partners now on deals as well. Like I said, I've just tried to add value by turning people into partners in one way or another. So he's been a huge fan for years, season ticket holder for 5 or 6 years now. This is my wife and I got season tickets this year with my buddy Kevin. And my wife is this out of nowhere. She's not historically a sports fan at all, but she's this massive fanatic that's hooting and hollering and screaming and everything. So, but the games are a lot of fun. Man, that is a good question. I was hopeful that they would be doing better than they are right now, but they have seemingly found a way to just blow some games that you just can't believe they blew it that bad. So the season's still pretty early. So I'm hopeful that they've got a lot of talent on the team. They just have to be playing better than they are right now.
All right. I'm not going to let you tiptoe around this one like you did the 5 years. So you got to put something down. How far are they going to make it?
I think they'll make it about halfway through the playoffs. I don't think that they're going to go much further than that.
All right. So I'm gonna mark it down that Ken Hitchcock's going to turn them around and they're going to make it all the way to the finals this year.
I hope so.
There you go. So if I'm right, then I can use this in June and be like, I told everybody, and otherwise it's on a real estate investing podcast, and everyone at this point will just stop listening.
And I hope I'm wrong. So.
All right, Mike. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us. I know you're an extremely busy guy, and I appreciate you taking the time to share what you did with us today and everything that you do for the real estate investing community and also for the local DFW real estate investing community. You're someone that I look up to, and I aspire to be like you one day.
Hey, man, I appreciate the kind words, and hopefully our paths will cross soon. So thanks for the opportunity to be here with you.
All right, Mike. Talk to you soon.
All right, take care.
Thanks so much for listening to the Titanium Vault with your host, RJ Bates III. For more info and to stay up to date, visit www.podcast.thetitaniumvault.com and on facebook.com/The Titanium Vault. If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review, and we'll catch you next time on the Titanium Vault.